Yo ho wee, yo ho wee, yo wee ya. Hey hi yo ho wee ya wee ya.
Hey, hi, ho, ho, wee, ha, wee, ha, wee, yo.
What we just sang for you is the Haida National Anthem. We sang one verse of a 3-verse song. The song comes from a long time ago, but it was renewed within the Haida Nation in 1985, when our ancestors decided that no more government, no more big industry, clear-cutting of our homeland was going to be allowed. So they protested, and they protested for 3 months, blocking any additional tree from being cut down in Haida Gwaii. And when the RCMP or the police came in to arrest those protesters, the elders stood up and said, we are going to stand in front, we are going to be the ones to be arrested. You young people have the rest of your lives in front of you. We're old, we're gonna retire, we're all retired, we don't have careers. We are the ones who can be arrested. And so our elders, in their traditional regalia and button blankets, were arrested by some of our own people for protesting. And the result of that was a forever protection of our Haida forests on Haida Gwaii. And the song that was traditionally a canoe song became our Haida National Anthem.
And it's usually referred to as the Lyle Island song. The Haida Nation is the rightful heir to Haida Gwaii. Our culture is born of respect and intimacy with the land and sea and the air around us. Like the forest, the roots of our people are intertwined, such that the greatest troubles cannot overcome us. We owe our existence to Haida Gwaii. The living generation accepts the responsibility to ensure that our heritage is passed on to following generations. On these islands, our ancestors lived and died, and here too, we will make our homes until called away to join them in the great beyond. This is the preamble to our Haida Nation Constitution. And every time we read it, we work in Alaska with our Alaska Native people. Every time we read it to them, they can dream and aspire to be the best of who we are as Native people and put that to work in our tribal governments, because it says something very simply, which is, it is our responsibility. At the core of that message, it is not about a national identity, it is about our responsibility to caretake for the next generations.
As was already said, there's a dip in the stage. As was already said, this is my sister, Láaganaay Tsiits Git'anee. She is an eagle of the Tsiits Git'anee clan that comes from Haida Gwaii, Masset. Her main crest is the hummingbird that you can see on her jacket. She is also a tlingit. She's raven, kach'ari, freshwater mark sockeye salmon, and she lives in her tlingit village of Kiiksjuan in southeast Alaska. The mouth of the Dawn people is another way that it is expressed in English. She is an elected tribal leader serving as vice president of the organized village of Cake. She is also co-founder of the Gínga and Igniñ collective, which is a nonprofit started by a number of us sisters to amplify Indigenous voices and Indigenous values.
Yeah. Jahawa. And this is my sister, Wáahlaal Gíidaak. Can you say Wáahlaal? You put your tongue at the tip of your the roof of your mouth and right behind your front teeth, and you blow air out the sides of your cheeks.
Wash.
Wáahlaal Gíidaak. And it means the person who carries the weight of the potlatch. And it means that she's a party giver. And in our culture, a party giver is a person who gives away all their wealth to the community. It's the way that we show wealth is by giving everything we have away. Wáahlaal Gíidaak is Haida as well. She's Raven from the Yaukjanas clan, the Shark House from both Hikdahanlai, Heidelberg, and Auklagi in Haida Gwaii, British Columbia. She's also the granddaughter of the Tlingit, which is the Tlingit clan, and they are the dog salmon people. She comes on her Tlingit side from Klawock, and she's also the daughter of the Nelchina, the Sky Clan people of the Ahtna Athabascans, kind of in the south central interior part of Alaska. Yeah. She serves as the vice president of Arctic and Northern Waters for Ocean Conservancy and is also a co-founder of Gínga and Igniñ Collective, which is the nonprofit she spoke of earlier. In our cultures, her and I balance each other. She's a raven, I'm an eagle. And so it's appropriate we introduce each other. And we've also been working on both of us learning our language. So maybe next time you hear us speaking, we'll actually share more of our language with you. But Láaganaay Tsiits Git'anee so much for having us today.
And thank you for allowing us to speak and introduce our ancestors to you before we start our presentation. It is so significant that we can bring our ancestors into this room in Paris, France, all the way from Haida Gwaii to be with you today. When we were talking about building an Indigenous law of the sea, something that was really important to us was the stories that our people share and the stories that are reflected in our laws and protocols that dictate how we have relationship with our oceans and our waters today. So I don't know how many of you heard me speak yesterday, but I was talking about an ancestor that was found on Prince of Wales Island in a cave, an ancestor that had carbon-dated proof to about 10,000 years ago. And that same ancestor, when tested against the DNA of people today, matched. So this is one of our ancestors, the earliest relative that we have had relations with and that made themselves, reveal themselves to our people and to our community. And when they tested our ancestors' stomach DNA, they found salmon in the stomach of our ancestor. So for 10,000 years, we've had a relationship with salmon, at least. Our history and our way of being and knowing goes back to we were created in the lands of Haida Gwaii and in Prince of Wales Island. But in today's context, many social scientists want that carbon-dated proof to prove how old you've lived on a component of land. So we know for at least 10,000 or 15,000 years. And for 10,000 years, that relationship with salmon, which, by the way, if you look 10,000 years ago, what kind of salmon existed in the world? They were saber-toothed salmon. I don't know if anybody's Googled it, but they were huge. And you think about today's context and bringing that forward. My Dene grandmother, my Ahtna grandmother, was 8 years old when she encountered her first non-native person in our homelands of Chestachina, which means that no non-native people had entered that area until she was 8 years old. She died about the age of 90, and she died about 10 years ago. So you can imagine that for 80 years, first contact is brand new to the Dene or the Ahtna people of my grandmother's region. But it only took 80 years for salmon to be almost extinct in our homelands. 80 years of folks coming in saying, we have the best data on Earth, and we are going to manage in the absolute best way to protect these salmon and to ensure that everybody gets salmon. Well, guess what? For at least 9,820 years, our people had held a balanced relationship with that salmon. And it took less than 80 for those salmon species to collapse in my grandmother's home river. So if you think about who had a better track record of keeping a balanced relationship and actually ensuring that every single person who wanted to have a relationship with salmon could, I think the track record actually proves that maybe Indigenous knowledge had a better system of figuring out how to ensure that those salmon would not only continue to maintain and support and nourish our people today, but for the next 10,000 years.
I was also thinking about a story that would illustrate another Indigenous law of the sea. One of our elders, who's now an ancestor, told us this story about, I want to say, 8 years ago. We were sitting having dinner, and in our way, it's customary that after you come and eat dinner at someone's home, you have an obligation to share good stories with them. And so he was telling us some of the stories that he had heard when he was a child. And this story in particular, I think, is really critical because it shows the way that our people think about our homelands. He was telling us the story of an elder in his time who, in the 1950s, was struggling. He was struggling to provide for his family. He was struggling to get fish. He was struggling to get deer. He was going through a really hard time as a provider for his family. And every time he went out, he would come back with nothing. And he finally remembered a teaching from our elders from long ago. And that was to humble yourself before the ocean and to ask our non-human relatives for help. And so that's what he did on the back of his boat. He spoke out into the land, out into the ocean, and he said, "I ask for your help, my relatives. I cannot feed my family. Please help me. Bring some food home to my family." And sure enough, right after he made his prayer and his request, 2 killer whale fins popped up behind the boat. Now he had 2 trawl rods out on both sides of his boat. And those 2 killer whale came up, and as they came faster and faster up behind his boat, and he just stood there watching them in awe, which is what any human's reaction is to seeing a killer whale. All of a sudden, both lines took off. Zzz! And he had 2 king salmon on both lines at the same time. Those killer whale heard him and brought him fish. This is an Indigenous law of the sea. Humble yourself and ask for help. Before we left for a canoe journey in 2016, my clan elder, Kaanak Ruth Demert, who's also Kach'adi freshwater mark sockeye salmon, reminded all of us who were in the canoe, when you get out there, don't be afraid. Your ancestors are waiting. Don't forget to put your hand in the water and tell the animals that live there what you were doing. Tell them you were trying to pull the canoe up to Juneau, Alaska for celebration, and ask them for their help. And so this is something that we practice even still today.
So what is the Indigenous law of the sea? It sounds big, it sounds grand, it sounds like you're just putting the word Indigenous in front of the law of the sea. That is not our intent. Our intent is not to put the word Haida in front of every word of the law of the sea. Our intent is to show the world, while we still have these relationships with our beyond human beings, that these are the laws that have grounded how we've operated in balanced relationship since time immemorial. And so when we're thinking about this law of the sea, it is not from a top down. It is not the nations deciding what is best for us in our communities on the ground. It is for us to decide as nations of Haida people, of Tlingit people, of Maoris, of Dene, of our different relatives around the Pacific and around the Arctic, to express the relationship we've always held with the ocean and with the beings that exist in the ocean. And from that, to funnel those up into a braided commonalities of things that we share in common with our relationship with the ocean. Number one of those laws being that we all recognize the ocean as its own being, that the ocean has its own life and its own life force, its own spirit to be respected and to uphold in every single conversation we're having. That's an easy one that almost every Indigenous community across the Pacific and across the Arctic can express in one way or another. And so with the building of the Indigenous law of the sea is an urgency to share those relationships while we still have those relationships. As I said, we're seeing collapses of almost every single species in Alaska, in our oceans and on our lands. And those relationships, those stories are going to start fizzling out as we no longer have those relationships with our beyond human beings. So it is at a precipice that we must share these stories with the world. The world has to figure out a better method because where we're at right now is not working. It is not. It is failing our communities. It is failing our future generations. It is failing my son and my future grandchildren. we have to do something better, and maybe that something better is not what we've been doing, but a look back at what was a successful measure of what has always been.
So the effort is one that has existed since time began, which is to continue our relationship by utilizing something that we've always had, our inherent sovereignty as tribal nations around the oceans and inland, because we don't see these things as disconnected. And so through the Indigenous Law of the Sea, we are co-creating a pathway by which we unite our sovereignties and we flex our diversity as Indigenous people, because we know we have a responsibility. This is not a forum that's designed to ask somebody else's permission. This is a forum designed for our peoples, our Indigenous peoples, to actually utilize their sovereignty and our understanding of our responsibility to protect our ocean relatives and our non-human relatives. And so with that, I wanted to share something very quickly. One of our aunties, her name is Faye Ewan, and she's from Otna region of Alaska. And she reminded us that at this point in time in human history, everybody else's solutions have been failing. And now they're coming to us as Indigenous people. The difference now is that before, people used to co-opt us, used to take what we have as knowledge, as lived experience, as deep relationship and connection, and co-opt it and commodify it. And this time we're asking our own people to not worry so much about the external, but more importantly, worry about the internal components of our spiritual existence in relationship to our ocean and non-human relatives. And that is what the Indigenous Law of the Sea is about.
What we're asking folks right now is we have relationships that pre-exist just based on our mutual protection. We know that there are a lot of, the Pacific alone is so many Indigenous peoples. And if you want to join in this effort as an Indigenous nation, or if you know people who you think, you know, I've got a really good friend who would be amazing to be a part of this conversation as it grows. We are still at the baby stage of what this can look like and what it can be. We had a gathering in Alaska just before we came here with our relatives from Aotearoa, our Maori relatives, our friends from Palau, our friends from Hawaii, our friends from the Arctic, and we sat and we said, okay, if we're to write this, if we're to move into community, what does it look like for us to ensure that we are not just another extractive measure that is being used to manipulate Indigenous knowledge in a space where we are going to be thought of as an afterthought or as a non-voting participant in another body. This is for us to have our own table, to create our own table, to work through treaties and recognition of Indigenous knowledge that carries in the Maori people to the Haida people, to the Hawaiian people, and to everybody throughout the Pacific, everybody in the Arctic, and to have these conversations. I know there's a lot more oceans than just those two, but this is where we're starting. It is a big endeavor, and we're asking for folks to come along and to be a part of this process with us.
We thank you. In Tlingit language, our word for thank you is gunalchish, and it means without you this would not have been possible. We would not be able to be here sharing this critical work on behalf of our people if you were not here lifting up our words so they do not fall on the ground. And in Haida we say Jahaua, thank you so much. Very big thank you for listening to us today. Tlingit Jahaua.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.